Anyway, I'm very thankful for the support of our chair, Stacy, who is with us tonight, and for the support of Karen Lee, who has really helped prod this into being. And of course, for our speaker, Stephen Tagle. This month's Kafeneion was organized by our Thessaloniki chapter, and we have our chapter representative, Peter Bader, and we have our chapter chair, Randall Horner, with us tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to Peter to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And good evening to everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our Kafeneion speaker for the evening, whom I first met several years ago here in Thessaloniki. Stephen Tagle, currently a fellow for the Institute of World Affairs in Northern Greece, is a writer, photographer, and Philhellene. He has been a recipient of an Asian American Writers Workshop Margins Fellowship, a Fulbright Fellowship to Greece, and a Soros Fellowship for New Americans. He has been published in LARB, New Delta Review, Spork, The Rumpus, LAFO, and Nea Estia, and served as speechwriter for the US Embassy in Athens. His recent assignments in Greece include work with the Stavros Niarchos Foundation funded New Agriculture for a New Generation program, Anatolia College, and the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. A graduate of Stanford University and the University of Massachusetts, Stephen is originally from California, but as he himself writes in a wonderful essay in Greek, no less, and published in Nea Estia in June 2019, quote, this is my translation, "In Greece, I feel more open, more curious, more social." In this article, he also speaks forcefully about the absolute necessity of his learning Greek language well enough so that he can finally decide whether he would be able to settle in Greece permanently. Stephen has already explored and written about many of Greece's historical sites and mythological realms, and fittingly has made the trek up to Mytikas, highest peak of Mount Olympus, home of the ancient gods. With that, I gladly hand the floor over to Stephen.
Peter, thank you so much for that really warm introduction. I just remember coming to your house a couple of years ago because I was interested in climbing up to Mytikas, and I had heard that you went up every summer, and I just remember all the advice that you gave me about the trail and the path, and that was just such an incredible feeling. Also to meet someone who, like many of you, have decided to make your homes here in Greece, and it was really wonderful for me to see like a model of that in action. And so I'm so happy to be speaking with you all today about my past 5 years here in Greece and how much the country has changed me, embraced me, and how much I continue to learn every day that I'm here. So I want to thank Peter and Randall and Mary and the whole Thessaloniki chapter of Democrats Abroad for organizing this event. Sarah Jane, Karen, Stacy, for all your help getting the word out, taking care of all of the logistics behind the scenes, and for your support. So I have a PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you all. So I'm going to turn that on now. Okay. And
Get my son. Stop the video. I'll stop the video.
Okay, terrific. So what brought me to Greece? I came to Greece through its mythology. I had read Greek myths since I was a kid, and I was just intrigued by a people whose gods were as raucous, as petty, and as vindictive as they were noble and just. They had all the virtues and the foibles of regular human beings, and that really appealed to me. Also, Greek heroes continuously crossed the boundaries between men and gods, between the living and the dead. They featured really strong female characters, and these characters just raged either to downfall or glory. So, inspired by this sort of spiritual kinship with these ingenious and strong-willed Greeks, I started to rewrite Greek myths to subvert established narratives and to represent the experiences of marginalized groups. Especially when I was doing my Master's of Fine Arts at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, I really started to explore how Greek myths could be retold in order to reflect some of the struggles that I'd gone through, or that Asian Americans or queer people have gone through, and kind of using the myths as a way to examine more marginalized identities was something that was really fruitful for me. And so I rewrote the myths of Narcissus and Echo, for example. I rewrote the myth of Eros and Psyche. And after that, I started to think, to start to kind of look more outwards and to think about how myths could also be used to retell the story, the modern day story of the city of Greece, Greece as a country, and also to sort of create a sort of order from the modern chaos of the financial crisis and the refugee crisis that Greece was going through at the time. Because in the ancient times, the myths were used to sort of explain and bring order to chaos. And so I thought that if it worked then, maybe it would work now as well. So I first visited Greece in the summer of 2015. And as many of you know, this was a very different time than it is now. This was right after the referendum in the summer, when there were capital controls and people were lining up outside of ATMs to withdraw money. And so it was a very chaotic first introduction to Greece. But at the same time, I was able to get in touch with my future mentor at the University of Thessaloniki. I had a chance to explore Thessaloniki and explore Athens a bit, and to get a sense of how those cities differed from each other and what life was like in each of those places. And based on those experiences, I just felt this sort of, it was almost love at first sight in a way. I felt like there was this connection between me and this place. Climate-wise, it was very similar to Southern California, where I grew up. And I think, Los Angeles, like Athens, is a city that's kind of spread out between the mountains and the sea. And I think that also contributes to a lot of similar temperaments between the people there. I think Los Angeles, like Athens, is probably not what you would call the most beautiful city, but it also has so many hidden gems within its strip malls and different things like that. And I think Athens too, if you can look past the graffiti and things like that, there are some really beautiful places in the city. And so I was just so drawn to Athens, to Thessaloniki, and to Greece. Thessaloniki had such a warm, welcoming environment, a beautiful seaside. And I just, from my first taste of the Thessaloniki bugatsa with crema, I just fell in love, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I was really excited to dive into the culture. And one of the most important things I did before coming to Greece, like Peter said, was to start to invest in learning the language. About a year before I So I was very lucky because in my final year at UMass Amherst, I applied for a Fulbright fellowship to come to Greece to study Greek mythology and how Greek myths could be retold to reflect the financial crisis and the refugee crisis. And as I was preparing my application, I began to learn Greek as well. So I took Skype sessions with a tutor in Athens, and he was also one of the first friends that I made here in Greece. When I visited in 2015, I stayed at his place and later attended his wedding and visited him in his summer house in Chios and met his family and relatives. And so that's just one small example of how, you know, all the connections that I've made since even before I started to before I came to Greece, have kind of resulted in these lifelong kind of deep connections that I really value and that have really benefited me. So after graduating from UMass in 2016, I came to Greece on a Fulbright fellowship, and this is a photograph of our Fulbright class from 2016, 2017 on the steps of the American School of Classical Studies. That year, I was able to travel widely in Greece through landscapes that retain the power and mystery of myth. And I was also able to witness many of the country's unique festivals and customs. I felt so lucky that the Fulbright gave me the support that I needed, but also the freedom to create my own program and to experience lots of different sides of this country. So I was able to do some teaching, as I'll go into later, and also did some work with refugees in Athens and in Thessaloniki. And I continued my Greek lessons at the Athens Center in Pangrati, and was also able to make connections with some of the public diplomacy folks at the US Embassy, and that helped lead later to my job as a speechwriter for 2 years at the embassy. So during that year, that whirlwind year, I was shooting around all throughout Greece, visiting, chasing mythological creatures and following the path of Odysseus, following the path of Hercules through the Peloponnese. So here you have just a sample of some of the places I visited. The cave of Cyclops at Antiparos, the sacred oak tree of Dodoni, Delphi, of course, and then Knossos on Crete. And I think what struck me from that year is that Greece is a land that is so rich in stories. There are just so many layers of history here. And whether you're speaking to, a fisherman or a yaya at a cafe, or whether you're learning about the Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire and all the different waves of migration and how the borders have shifted over time, it has centuries and centuries of stories. And that's, as a writer, that's been so helpful for me, because I just feel like every day I'm being steeped in such a long and storied history. And it's something that inspires me every day. So thanks to Fulbright, I've been able to visit so many of these places related to myth, where our world still seems to touch the world of the gods. I've walked along the Acheron River, where the spectral blue waters seem colored by the spirits of the dead. I've listened to prophecy at in the rustling oak leaves at the Dona, and felt stalactites drip onto the back of my neck as a silent boatman ferried me through the caves of Diros. And so one of the things that just really struck me at first is the power and diversity of the Greek landscape. Whether it's a sudden downpour, a flash of lightning across the sky, the sort of merciless wind that you can have here in Alexandroupoli or down in Monovasia, or the complete stillness of some places, like this oak, this grove that I found in Corfu up here. It's incredible to me. people don't seem to know, but you have every single season, and you saw that in Athens just a couple of weeks ago. But it's amazing. The mountains here, the desert islands, the green islands. I've been really fortunate to experience a great deal of this country. And so also matching the diversity of the landscape is just the diversity and the richness of the food here. Just to give some examples, this is the best bread I ever had was from this village of Alatohori near Katerini. And this was from the taverna of a guy who, had live yeast and would just feed it and bake with it, but also continue to replenish it. And every day he tended to his yeast. And this is just some of the most delicious thick bread that I've ever tried. Then of course you have like barbunya, my favorite bugatsa. And then this manitaropita, this mushroom pie, is one of my all-time favorite dishes. This is from Epirus, from the village of Radeto. And I met a friend there who, her name is Constantina, and she has this little cafe. And when I first went to Epirus in, I think it was, it was the new year, it was January of 2017. She had just opened her cafe, and I was the very first customer who came in, and she had a map where she wanted people to place pins, or visitors to place pins from where they were from. So I got to place the first pin from the US. And then she also had me put one from, the Philippines and from China, where my parents were from. And so when I returned to Radeto 2 summers ago, in June of, I think it was 2020, she knew that I loved this mushroom pie so much. And so she asked her mother if she could prepare it for me. And so when I arrived at the cafe, there was this huge mushroom pie, my favorite dish of all time, just waiting for me. And so it was such a warm welcome. Okay, and then that leads right into just the hospitality and the generosity of the people that I've met here. So this is a picture from the village of Tirnavos, and I came to Tirnavos to witness the carnival celebrations there. They have very interesting celebrations related to fertility, and so everything they do is sort of has a phallus theme. So they have giant phalluses that people wave on their arms, and lollipops and things like that. And I went to this crowded taverna for lunch, and of course it was impossible to get a seat because everyone in the village had come out for the day, and it was completely full. But then this family invited me to join them for lunch, and we just we ate and drank and laughed together. And after that, they invited me to come to spend Easter with them a few weeks later. And so my first traditional Easter, grilling lamb in the backyard, was with this family who just took it upon themselves to invite a stranger to come sit with them. And so they're one of the families in Greece that I still keep in touch with and try to see whenever I'm passing through central Greece. And this is a story that just keeps happening over and over again. And I think I'm always really surprised by how people are so willing to just open up themselves, open their homes, and welcome strangers in. And I think that sense of philoxenia in the most genuine sense is something that I have learned during my time here. And so just to give you 2 other examples, I was on the island of Kalymnos when I ran into these Greek rock climbers, and they invited me to come spend the day with them at the beach, and we played Scrabble in Greek. And then my friends Maria and Dimitris invited me to spend time with them on Chios in the southern Mastic villages one summer. And this is Dimitri. He's cooking some steak on a grill just outside their house in one of those little alleys, and using a hair dryer to stoke the coals. And then this is my class at Aristotle University in 2017. I taught a workshop for a semester on Greek mythology and retelling Greek myths as a creative writing workshop. And so I had 20 students who were juniors and seniors studying American literature and culture. And usually the school offers a creative writing workshop whenever they have a Fulbright scholar. So these are students who have waited, a couple years for a Fulbright scholar to come to do a creative writing workshop. So everyone was super excited about the workshop, and I was just blown away by how well they were able to write in English these really, really dramatic and interesting creative works, short stories, poems. And the goal of the course was to dive into the archive of Greek myth and to use it to explain something about their life or their experience in Greece today. And I found it really interesting that many of these students don't have a lot of experience with Greek myth. I think for them it was something more far away. They maybe studied it as children, but it didn't play. I was surprised to find that it didn't play a large role in their daily lives, and that was something that was really surprising to me at first. But they ran with it, and this is a picture from our reading on the final day, and I was just so proud of the work that they prepared. And I learned a lot from these students as well. We would go out for coffee or for drinks after our workshops once a week. And then they also really took care of me. This is a picture of one of the classes. It was held on my birthday, and they brought these balloons to celebrate, and they brought me some trigona from Elenides, which was absolutely spectacular. But I learned so much from them, because not only were they bringing me their yaya spoon sweets and halva, but they were also really open about sharing with me the struggles that their families went through during the financial crisis, how they often would have to choose a school that was close to where one of their siblings lives, so they could share an apartment, for example. They shared with me their hopes and dreams, what they hope to do after they graduate. Many plan to try to do a PhD abroad, or do a master's program abroad. And these young people were so smart and so innovative. And they shared stories about first love, about coming out, about overcoming anxiety. And I just really appreciate the trust that they placed in me. And so another thing that was really interesting to me was the way in which Greece serves as a global crossroads. And that was something that was really highlighted for me as I spoke to refugees who had come to Greece. And also as I learned more about the waves of migration that had passed through Greece throughout history. So this is a picture from the eco camp near Thessaloniki. During my first month in Greece, it was August of 2016, I went up with a group of friends to volunteer at one of the many camps that were around in northern Greece and around Thessaloniki at that point. And the refugees were staying in this tents inside of a huge bunker. And this was a day camp where they had like a women's center, a little kitchen, and activities and English classes for refugees. But they were also very welcoming. They brought us into their tents and served us hot tea, and it was incredible and really moving to hear how much they'd sacrificed and struggled in order to make this really difficult journey across the Aegean, and then the struggles that they faced at the border as they were trying to cross over into Bulgaria or other countries. And this is a picture of the Solidarity Now refugee team that ran in the Athens Marathon in 2016. So when I was in Athens, I had the chance to work for this NGO called Solidarity Now, and they ran a center that provides services for migrants, but also for disadvantaged people in the center of Athens. And they also ran some of the UNHCR hotels that were in the center of Athens at the time. So I was able to visit some of these hotels and speak with the refugees who were staying there. I learned to play the game Trex with them. And I was just so moved by their stories. And I had this opportunity. This is sort of how I've spent most of my time in Greece, is trying to talk to as many people as possible and trying to record stories of different people that I've met. So it's something that I've done with Solidarity Now. It's something I've done with the project New Agriculture for a New Generation. So for example, this is the story of Rajab, which we'll provide a link to you to read. But it's about how he grew up, the forces that motivated him to cross, to try to enter the EU, and his hopes for the future. And another thing that was really surprising to me when I first came to Greece was just how important the role of orthodoxy and faith is in Greek life. I think since my first impression of Greece was through Greek mythology, I didn't realize that modern Greece is, I didn't realize what an important role orthodoxy plays for modern Greeks. And that's something that's been really fascinating for me as I visited sites like Meteora, Agion Oros, and just recently I was in DAGR for the Theophania, and just was able to witness some of these really incredible and unique customs. Here a group of young men carry icons and the cross and run around the church 3 times in sort of a magic protective circle that harkens back to these more ancient types of religious rituals. And then the week that I spent on Mount Athos was one of the great highlights of my time in Greece so far. This was during Megalia Vemada, the week leading up to Easter. And there was such a deep sense of peace. I slowly made my way around the peninsula and was able to talk with monks from all over the world. And the natural beauty and the sort of self-contained nature of the peninsula just gives you such a deep inner peace. I could see why it's so conducive to meditation and to religiosity. It's just, also the landscape is just so stunning. And so then over the past couple of years, I've been able to dig deeper through different work that I've done here in Greece. And so one of this has been through New Agriculture for a New Generation. I was able to spend time in Thessaly and northern Greece, speaking with young people who were young farmers who were interested in enriching or growing their production. So the purpose of this project was to give young people the skills and the training and the know-how that they needed to really help to grow and re-energize the Greek agricultural sector. And so there were professors from the American Farm School and from the Agricultural University of Athens who would go out and spend time visiting young people and offering them, the knowledge that they need to really build beekeeping practices, to build Greek mountain tea production, And so I was able to tag along and to speak to a lot of these people and find out about farms that had been in their families for generations and how they planned to bring new life and new energy and new technology to bear to really make a living and return to the land in that way. And so that was really incredible. I've also had the opportunity to work with Sam Albatross and his website Queer Poets in Greek. And the goal of this project is to translate LGBTQ poems and work from American or English speakers into Greek so that they can be shared with Greek-speaking audiences and to make them more accessible for the queer community here. And so I was able to translate a couple of poems from English into Greek with Sam's help. And Sam also has a book that just came out. It's called Elatomatiko Aurori, and it's been a bestseller from Estia publishers for months now. And so I'm also really excited to maybe work with him to help translate the book into English. And so that's a project that I'm really looking forward to. And then also during the pandemic, when it was impossible to travel, I had the chance to work with the Benaki Museum and the Patrick and Joan Lee Firmer Art Fund to identify the locations of photographs that Joan Lee Firmer had taken for a reissuing of her book. So this was a lot of work on Google Maps, reading through Patrick Lee Firmer's books again and connecting his descriptions with places in the photographs. And it took a lot of detective work, but it was an incredible way to travel during the pandemic and to see other parts of Greece or parts of Greece from decades ago, what places were like then. It's a really incredible experience. And then, for the past 2 years, I was working at the US Embassy as Ambassador Pyatt's speechwriter, and that just gave me such great insight into every aspect of US-Greece relations at a very exciting time for the bilateral relationship. And as many of you know, Ambassador Pyatt is super active. He's always speaking and doing events and giving talks. And so, it was a very steep learning curve, but sometimes I would be writing remarks and articles that he would give like 4 events a day at some points. But it really, I learned so much during my 2 years there. And it also inspired me to pursue my current project with the Institute of Current World Affairs. And so the project that I'm doing now for the next 2 years is to explore Greece's frontiers, because most of the time that I've spent in Greece, I've been living either in Thessaloniki or in Athens, the 2 largest cities. And so I really wanted to see what life was like in the villages and towns and islands on Greece's borders, and how the changes there and the investments there would affect Greece's future and also the future of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Balkans. So I'm currently located in Alexandroupoli in Evros. And, it's so interesting to me because this is a place that, many Greeks and definitely many Americans have not visited. But it's a place that's so full of, it has a great natural environments, the Evros Delta, the forest of DAGR. It also has great cultural significance as well. So this is the picture that I took with the family of Karofilis Diotzidis, who is a famous Thracian musician, and his family in Karoti. I was able to be there when they were filming a documentary about the family, and got to meet all of them and hear some of this classic laiki, this Thracian music it was really eye-opening and interesting the way that it reflected the history and the customs of this place. And so I've been traveling out to the different villages in northern Evros. I've been exploring the archaeological sites and the natural environments. And I think the deeper I dig, the more and more there is to see here, I think. And likewise, my next stop after this, in the summer, I'll be headed to the island of Chios, and I'll be using that as my base to explore Lesbos and Samos as well, and to look at the situation with migrants on the islands. But also I'm really interested in the unique cultivation of mastika, the tree sap, that's specific just to Chios, and the way in which people from Chios have really traveled not just across Greece, but to London and to the US. And I'm really interested in exploring some of the connections there between, I think Chiots are especially people that have moved around a great deal. And then finally, I'll spend the last 8 months of my fellowship on Crete. And I'll be exploring some of the collaboration that's happening at Suda Bay, but also really want to spend time exploring the culture of Cretan villages. I think Crete is especially known for fiercely defending its identity and its freedom. And of course, Crete has some of the most fantastic and unique landscapes in all of Greece. And Cretan food is just incredible, of course. So I'm really looking forward to spending my final 8 months of the fellowship there. And so that's my story until now. This is a picture from Mythikas. Many thanks to Peter for his advice. And I'm just really happy to hear from all of you and answer any questions that you might have for me. So thank you so much.
When can we ask questions?
Okay, hi, I just turned off my microphone. Actually, Peter, could you turn down your speaker? Okay, so Stephen, we have a few questions.
Sorry.
Glad to
you wanna
take
start
any
with the
devices
chat,
set
or
up at the same time.
raise your hand? There were some questions in the chat, so why don't we get started from there? Looking for the beginning.
Oh, there's 31 in the chat.
Yeah, well, Stephen, one of the questions was where are you living now, but I think you answered that. You told us you're in Alexandroupolis for now.
That's right. So
And
I came here in October, and I'll be here until about May or June. The goal is to spend about 8 months in each of these 3 regions.
So perhaps we can see you sometime.
Yes, definitely.
well,
How
I
can we
think most
communicate
of
with
the
you?
information in the chat is things for us to look up and read, and not necessarily questions. So I see Peter has a question. Peter Grease,
No, I don't.
No,
I
another
don't know
Peter.
why I'm there.
another
Can I
Peter.
have a question?
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Pete Grease. I'm in Thessaloniki now. Stephen, thanks for the presentation. I had the pleasure of reading some of your recent dispatches over the last few days. You write extremely well and thoughtfully, and I really enjoyed them. So thank you for that. My question is about a statement in your latest dispatch from your current location, which was about the US military presence. And there was a line where you said that you believe that anti-Americanism is ebbing in Greece. And I was wondering, given your 2 years at the embassy, but also, sort of what is the basis upon which you make that claim other than your own personal experience? So do you have a sense of kind of the deeper I think you mentioned in the article some of the sources of anti-Americanism in Greece that are more historical. So I was wondering if you could just elaborate on that a little bit. And if you want to, and if there's time, I don't want to hog all of your time. I'm also curious about your experience as an Asian American in Greece. So you speak Greek very well, and I think that immediately makes you accessible to a largely white Greek population. But I'm wondering if speaking Greek also enables you to overhear conversations, or you've ever experienced any kind of racism directly or indirectly in Greece, or how you might compare that to your experiences in the US in Southern California. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for the questions, Pete. I think first of all, in terms of anti-Americanism, I've never experienced anything personally, but I've heard stories about how things were in the 90s. There's the statues constantly being harassed and things like that. But I think ever since, because I came, as Greece was beginning to exit the financial crisis, and I think that the Obama administration's support of Greece during that time has really gone a long way to help open up the relationship between the two countries and allow for a deepening of the relationship. I mean, you still see a little bit of the vestiges of anti-Americanism, during the annual march with the Polytechnia, when they march from Syntagma to the US Embassy. When I was in Alexandroupoli and the American ship came, there was a small group of mostly leftists who were marching down Leoforos Dimokratias under my apartment, and lots of the rhetoric they used about closing the bases of death and not having an American base here is similar to this, kind of traditional rhetoric. But I think that the government the embassy and has done a really good job of sort of trying to create a bipartisan consensus in Greece. You had the support of the US-Greece relationship from the Syriza government, and so New Democracy was also able to pick up the ball on that and to continue to keep it rolling. And just as there's a really strong consensus about the importance of the US-Greece relationship here in Greece, over consecutive American administrations from Obama to Trump to Biden, you have really strong support for continuing to propel the relationship forward. And so I think we're at this sort of happy place where there's an alignment of strategic interests, kind of seeing Greece as a pillar of stability in the region, and efforts to just continue to grow that relationship, whether it's through new investments like we've seen from JP Morgan and others, Meta, and then energy cooperation with the FSRU in Alexandroupoli, people-to-people ties, increasing educational and cultural ties, and then regional cooperation like with the 3+1 and other mechanisms. And then in terms of being an Asian American in Greece, I think it's really funny because of all the people, no one would ever expect me to speak Greek. And so I've really, a lot of my friendships have started out where I'll say like, Kalimera or something, and people will just kind of give me a double look. And that sort of shock, once we begin to talk and I share like how much I've traveled and how interested I am in the country, that's been the start of a lot of really great friendships between me and people I've met just on a hiking trail or at a gas station or on the metro. So it's sort of something that a nice magic trick that I like to pull out every so often.
Thank you.
Stephen, sorry. There was another question that I missed. During COVID, did Greek hospitality ebb?
I don't think so. I mean, the one thing during COVID, when I was in Athens, I was living in this really small apartment because I had thought that I would be traveling every single weekend. But once the restrictions were in place and it was impossible to move outside of Athens, I really regretted that decision because I was spending most of my time at my kitchen table. I think in those early days, there was a lot of caution because you didn't know exactly how the virus could spread. And so I think people were very worried about just doing everything they could to be safe and stay healthy. But, you know, since then, as we've sort of gotten used to living with the virus and taking our precautionary measures, I think that, you know, people are excited to just be able to make connections again. And so everyone I've connected with up here has been really open and really welcoming.
Okay, and we have a few hands. Pauline, I guess is first on my screen.
Hi, thanks, Marian, and thanks, Stephen. My name is Pauline. I'm from Cypress, California, so not too far from your hometown of Yorba Linda, yeah. And I'm dialing in from Thessaloniki, and I had actually, Peter Grease had preempted my question because I also was wondering what it was like to be Asian American here, which you answered, but I was also wondering if just how it felt and if you've experienced any homophobic realities or reactions, or just how you've seen the environment here, because I guess I still have in my mind a little bit the perception that things are more socially conservative here. And I don't know if that's evolved or if I've sort of stayed a bit anchored in past perceptions.
I think it definitely is more conservative here, and that has to do a lot with the strong, you know, influence of religion here, and also the way in which family ties are so strong. And if you're living in a small town or in a village, there's a sense that, you know, your every action is being monitored by your neighbors or people. But I found that things have been really changing very quickly since I've been here. You know, you still have some priests who make these very incendiary statements, but you're also seeing more commercials featuring LGBTQ relationships, like you had the Lacta chocolate commercials that have come out recently. I think in a similar way, there's also a lot more attention to you know, women's empowerment, domestic violence, and I think that the community is really doing a lot to, you know, to keep moving forward on human rights. There are a lot of people, you know, Pride has gotten to be a much bigger event. I remember, you know, going to Thessaloniki Pride, I think in 2018, and you know, you had a couple people, it was a very small group that was trying to block the parade route. But then this year when I was in Athens too, I just remember going to Pride, and there were just so many people who, there were families there with you know, little kids waving flags. And so I think that this, it's kind of quickly changing the environment here, and it's something that it's really wonderful to see.
I have a question.
All
if I
right,
hand up.
Brady. I'm taking the hands that are raised and taking them in the order that I see them. So, but, okay, so Brady and then LK and then Andrea.
Yes.
Hi,
Okay,
Brady.
well, Steve, it's great to see you again, and I'm really envious of all your fantastic adventures. And I really appreciated that long dispatch from Alexandroupoli, because for me as a former diplomat, it's a reminder of how incredibly things have changed in terms of Greece's willingness to be a strategic point of entry for for the United States and NATO into a much broader region. And I guess my question is this: I live behind the embassy and see how massively it's expanded over the years. I see the expanding American military presence here. I mean, we've reached a footprint which is larger than it's been since the days of the junta. And my question is, at the moment, Greece and the United States have strongly parallel views of a dangerous world, with a few wrinkles about Russia and the like. But basically, it seems a very positive partnership. But my question is, do you see the United States remembering the lessons of the past and being careful to essentially not become too much of a political animal in Greek internal politics, to stay unobtrusive, to keep contacts with all sides as things go on? Because we had a terrible backlash, after the dictatorship, and this is nothing like that. But still, Greek partisan politics are so vituperative. Anyway, what's your sense of how delicately we're moving?
I guess I would really hope that we've learned our lesson from the past, because I think that that's a scar that's taken decades to really heal and to return to the level that we're at now. But I think that there is a really strong alignment of interests between the U.S. and Greece right now, and I think that alignment is what's propelling the relationship. And I think that I'm optimistic about all the work that the U.S. and Greece are continuing to do together. I think there's a real sense that we recognize that Greece is a really important partner, and I think those sensitivities will be kept in mind, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Breen.
LK?
Yes, hello. Luke is my name, actually. And a couple of questions for you, Stephen. First of all, I greatly enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was awesome. Part of the midway, I lost a little bit of contact because of Wi-Fi on my end, or lack thereof. So I'm gonna ask. I live in Kavala, actually with my Pinoy partner, with whom I think you have a lot in common. Did you mention Kavala? Did you come here? Yeah. He's also Pinoy, and we live together in Kavala. Did you come here? Or you're planning to come here to Kavala area?
I've been through Kavala, but I would love to come back. It's every time I drive from Thessaloniki to Alexandroupolis, I'm always tempted to stop by because it's such a beautiful city, and I love that you're able to see the castle and the aqueduct. And most recently I went to the archaeological museum there and was looking at some of the epigraphs. But it's such a beautiful city, and I really, I'm going to try to make it back soon.
Okay, please do. I went ahead and quote unquote connected with you on Facebook or Instagram. So you're more than welcome.
Cool.
And my partner and I would love to meet you, and we'd love to show you around all over Kavala. Thanks
so much, Luke. I appreciate it.
So until how long will you be in Northern Greece? Again, I missed part of the presentation.
Until June, May or June, probably.
Okay, but I thought you had like 8 more months or 18 months. Or is that the grand total?
Yeah. So from the summer, I'll be in Chios and Lesbos, starting in June for about until the end of this year, and then I'll be in Crete for the last 8 months.
Oh, and we love Crete. We've been like 10 times in 5 years. Anyway, so we have time. We'll meet in Kavala. We'd love to show you around, and excellent. We'll connect. Thank you so much.
I'll shoot you a message. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, please do. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Andrea, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment. As Stephen, I really enjoyed your talk, and trying to remember 35 years, actually more than that. But when I first came to Greece, and my enthusiasm, which has dimmed a bit, but you probably an Athens Pride organizer. And I'm actually the manager, the legal spokesperson, legal representative. And we're planning on doing what you saw last. Did you come? When did you come to Pride in 2019? Athens
I came
Pride?
last year to Athens
Oh,
Pride.
that was like a fraction. It was sort of, oh, let's have a parade. We're planning to have, God willing, COVID willing, to have a full scale event this year. And the main day is scheduled for June 18th. But I was really delighted to see your project on the Greek poets, the queer poets. And I don't know if you could manage to get to Athens at some point during the week before the 18th, which is our Pride Week, where we have Pride events, because I think that if you could somehow organize something, even on a small scale, it doesn't have to be in an auditorium, on this project, I think it would be super, really super. So I made a note of your email, and I'm on Facebook with my name.
Okay.
I'm sure we have friends in common, so send me a request, or I assume you're on Facebook. And,
I am, yeah.
The other thing is that's not so nice. I mean, you sort of mentioned in a kind of picturesque way, these priests that make remarks. I can tell you these remarks are deadly. They're violent, they're criminalized, they're criminal hate speech in every sense of the word. And one of the main achievements that our community had through an absolutely wonderful legal representation and an extremely courageous judicial bench in Eggio. I think it was 2018, 2019, I lose track with COVID in between, was the conviction of for hate speech of one of the most powerful bishops in Greece, Ambrosios, who subsequently retired, but not before having spewed incredible hate for 41 years. And if you scroll up the chat, I put in a link, it's at the very top of the chat, to a Guardian article about a conviction of 2 activists, and I'm one of them, not through Athens Pride, but through the other NGO that I work with, Greek Helsinki Monitor. And this was, read the story in the Guardian, absolutely outrageous anti-Semitism from another very powerful, Seraphim from Piraeus. He hates gays too. I mean, hates. These are usually go hand in hand. You hate Jews, you hate gays, both, you know? So I get it from all ends. But the religion here, I don't want to offend anybody, because I believe in God and I believe in religion and I respect everybody's faiths. But the Greek church can be really toxic. And none of this is cute at all. It's quite serious, because they have an extraordinary influence on ordinary Greeks, extraordinary influence, and all the homophobia stems from that. So it's important to keep that in mind. But anyway, on a brighter note, I'll be in touch with you about if you can manage. Otherwise, I will just be in touch.
Please do reach out, Andrea. I really appreciate it. That's something like, I would love to maybe present with Sam or some other, maybe you could read
It would
some
be
poems, something like that.
fantastic, and we have never done anything like this before. So, and it's nice to have a serious cultural event. So that's,
Right.
I'll definitely get in touch with you.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you're
So,
definitely right about how toxic the church can be in some respect. Like Ambrosius definitely stands out. I remember things that he said.
Yeah, well, Seraphim isn't much better, or he's no better. So anyway, we'll be in
There's another
touch.
question on chat. Sorry, did I interrupt you, Andrea? Okay. Anyway, there's another question on the chat. Can you share your knowledge of Greek perceptions of refugees? And if you see any shifts in that perception and why?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that I'm, writing about. It's one of the main threads in this 2-year project, and something that I'm looking at in Evros right now, and that I'll be continuing to look at when I get to the islands. I think it's a very complex picture right now, because I think the Greeks have sort of bore the brunt of these waves of migration for about 5 years now, on top of the financial crisis. And so I think in some people you have this, there was an outpouring of support at the beginning, around at the highest point around 2015. And then some of them have changed their attitudes where, they feel like they can't give anymore in a way. But I think there are other Greeks I've spoken with, especially here in Evros and some on the islands, who recognize that their grandparents and great-grandparents were also refugees from Asia Minor and other parts of the region. And so they've really held on to that as a reason to continue to provide support for the refugees and the migrants who continue to come. I think there's some debate about, how much people will be able to assimilate into Greek culture because of religion, or the difference, kind of similar to debates that we have in the States, whether there's a real danger to the migrants who are coming, or whether they're coming for economic reasons. Other people see that as the same thing, because if you can't put food on the table, you're looking for a better life, just like we all are. So there's just a wide range of opinions about this issue, as there are in the States. But it's, I think Greece is a region that's so impacted by what's going on with its neighbors. So I think, there have been worries about a new wave coming from Afghanistan, for example. And every time, the government's moves are very carefully scrutinized by all these locals who have kind of borne the brunt of the crisis and are kind of skeptical about changes that are happening. And of course, there are the issue of pushbacks as well, which have been documented by the media, but the government hasn't, claims that there aren't any pushbacks. So I'm going to continue to track the issue, and hopefully there'll be a new dispatch coming out about that in the next few months.
Okay. Stephen, there's a couple of related questions, or they're related to each other, I guess. Are your bets placed on the US being awarded the bid to manage Alexandroupolis port? And then there's another question, are the Chinese also bidding to manage the port?
Okay, so yeah, first of all, I think the Chinese are participating through, I think, the port of Alexandroupolis. But from what I've heard, that the port of Alexandroupolis isn't one of the favorites for the port. Of the four, the two most popular are the Quintana, the American interest, and then also the Bolloré French port interest. And I'm really hopeful that the Americans will win the port concession, but it's one of those things where I feel like you can never really tell what's going to happen until it happens, because there's also, historically, there's been a huge French presence in this region. Back during the Ottoman Empire, the French built the railroad that connects Alexandroupoli to, to the rest of the region. It was part of the Oriental Express railway line connecting the Constantinople with, with Western Europe. So it's one of those things where it's always hard to tell until it actually happens, but I'm very hopeful based on the collaboration that you've already had with an American military using part of the port for its logistical operations. I think the Americans have received a lot of support and goodwill from the town and really built relationships and friendships with people here. So I think if we win the concession, I think it'll just sort of supercharge a lot of other projects and collaborations that are already happening in Alexandroupoli and in the region. So fingers crossed on that.
All right. There was a follow-up on a question, but I think you've kind of covered it about Greece being having a long history of migration. So I think pretty much you've covered that one. And there's another question. Do the French represent an energy consortium?
So the French interest is part of, it's Bolloré, but it's a partnership with the Copelouzos group, which is in charge of the FSRU, the floating regasification unit project in Alexandroupoli, the natural gas project. And also they're working on a gas-fired power plant up here. So the consortium includes both the French company and this Greek energy company.
Okay. Luke, I noticed your hand is raised. Is it, did you raise it again?
Yes.
Or was it
Well, yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I was thinking maybe
Turn
this
it
was
down.
before.
Again, a follow-up to the previous lady 2 ladies ago, forgive me, I don't know her name, about the anti-Semitism, homophobia of the Greek Orthodox clergy. I can totally support and agree. From personal experience, I've been to Mount Athos like at least 5 times. And one time I did stay at the infamous Esphigmenou monastery, the one that are the rogues, that even Greeks hate them. The Greek government hates them. They've been cut off literally and physically with ties, no telephone wires, no electricity, because they basically deny the patriarch, because the patriarch met with the Dalai Lama, go figure. Anyway, back to Stephen directly. Have you, I'm sure you heard about the East Med pipeline from Cyprus to Greece and from Israel actually to Greece. And now the US used to be in favor, and then they suddenly dropped support, and now they're supporting the electricity East-West electrical grid. I wonder if you have any insight or your thoughts or opinions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think the way that this announcement was made was sort of, not very strategic. And I think there could have been a lot more communication in the way that this message was delivered. But from all the remarks that I've written over the past 2 years for the embassy, there's always been some hesitation, I think, about US support for the particular East Med gas pipeline, because it was a project that was in a very early stage still, and I think there were always concerns about the financial viability of the project. And I think in terms of the Biden administration, I think the focus more now is on energy projects that are green, sustainable, and so in that sense, energy and interconnectors make a lot more sense, because with electricity, that can come from gas, that can come from LNG, as opposed, and then also, I think that, what was I going to say? Also US support, just because the US isn't supporting the East Med gas pipeline doesn't mean that we're not supporting the cooperation that we've helped to build between the trilateral partnership with Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, for example. I think those are areas where we're continuing to lean in, and we're the U.S. is very, very interested in the FSRU, bringing liquid natural gas to Alexandroupoli, and is actually invested in that project. And then also the pipeline, lots of the pipelines that are going through Alexandroupoli and Thrace, like the IGB, the Greece-Bulgaria interconnector, and the connections with TAP and other things. Those are all things that the US is really supportive of. And I think it's just it's the financial viability of the project, but also the sort of the green aspect and moving to support projects that are more eco-friendly.
Sure, I agree. But also, like we've seen now, literally right now between Ukraine and Russia, Nord Stream may be in the past, may be cut, like literally a matter of days if Russia does the wrong thing. So that would make the East Med pipeline even more important, since we want Europe, we as Americans want Europe to depend on friendly oil rather than like on Russian oil of all things. And yes, I do agree about the green aspect, but I mean, I'm from Detroit. I know what it's like not to be green. It took the US like decades even to advance anything relatively green for, when the Japanese in the 80s and 90s. So if we're going to have oil, as much as I'm an environmentalist, and I am 100%, we're going to have oil longer than that we would like to get rid of it, because it's just that, what's the word, emotion, the opposite of motion, the inertia of just changing not our mindset and the technology and all the hardware that's still there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's going to take a lot more effort on everyone's part in order to meet the climate goals that we're setting for ourselves.
Considering the resistance from a big portion of the population,
yeah,
including politicians, of course, in the United States. Yeah, it will take a long time. Okay, there was another question here. Okay, Daniel says, your presentation is very positive and optimistic. What have been the frustrations that you've experienced, and how were you able to deal with these?
That's a really good question. I think sometimes let's see. I've experienced some frustration sometimes when you're like, for example, when I'm trying to get my taxes done or trying to renew my residence permit. Sometimes some of the processes here are a little bit unintuitive. And I think especially, I have this mindset of trying to get everything done in the most quick and efficient and direct way as possible. And one thing that I think is really an observation that a fellow Fulbrighter made during my first year here was that, sometimes, in some ways, like processes in the US can be made to maximize productivity at the expense of like jobs or but in Greece, sometimes it can be the other way, where you're trying to create jobs or things, and sometimes that can be at the expense of, kind of reductive processes and things like that. That's one thing. Let's see.
Quick note, forgot to mention that I'm also a fellow Fulbrighter.
Ah. Yeah, I think sometimes, I'll be trying to go exploring somewhere, and I think it took a while for me to figure out how to adjust to like the cultural expectations here and things like that. For example, I kind of growing up with the internet and mobile technology and everything, I'm much more of a texter than a phone call person. And I think Greeks here love to talk on the phone. And so I always kind of have to steel myself to make phone calls or to accept phone calls, where I think it's perfectly natural for people here. Just little things like that. But I think it's been as valuable for me to change, just as a way of embracing the culture here, as it is, I don't think anyone can expect for an entire culture to change just because you have a certain preference or you come to expect it a certain way in your country.
Okay. There was one comment from Karen Lee about the previous conversation we were having, the previous topic. Nord Stream 2 may not go ahead, but there is the Arctic port development that would open ocean transport, China, Russia, Northern Europe. Do you have a comment on that? Is it something you're familiar with?
I'm not something that I'm super familiar with, actually. I mean, I've written a little bit about Nord Stream 2, but I mean, I guess it just goes to show that China and Russia are very active in this region and in the Mediterranean. So I think it's just one more aspect where the US and Greece are working really closely to sort of manage the larger geostrategic, the geostrategic concerns in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, are there, maybe like we'll take one more question or one or two more questions. Yeah, Sarah Jane. And then we can call it a night for the Kafeneion.
Hi, Stephen. In fact, what I wanted to tell you was, you said something about when you were settling into Greece and taxes and you hadn't really figured it all out. Well, from my point of view, you figured a whole lot out. I mean, from the language to the poetry to understanding all of these moving pieces on the ground. I think it's just really incredible. You're a real Renaissance man. And we were really lucky to be able to listen to you put a perspective on so many things tonight. Just wanted to thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jane. I think, I mean, one of the things that I've tried to do most since I've been here is just to listen to people and try to meet people and talk to as many people as I can. I'm a storyteller. I love people's stories. I love hearing them and sharing them. And yeah, I think this is just a place that's so rich in that sort of raw creative material, that it's a place that I've felt really at home and really welcomed. So it's been a real pleasure to be here and also to share my experiences with all of you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments to Stephen?
Just a major thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you and everyone else as well. It's my first time in the Kafeneion. And have a good evening, everon. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay, Stephen.
And Stephen, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Παρακαλώ.
Παρακαλώ.
Thank you so much.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you, Stephen. Very
Stacey,
interesting.
I'm sure you have a few words.
Good night.
Good night,
Stephen, on behalf of Democrats Abroad Greece, I'm going to get my 2 cents in here and do a little commercial message as well. Thank you. Your story and the experiences that you have shared have been quite inspiring. We are political animals that are here. And one thing that I want to remind everybody of is that it's good to have a voice. And the way to have a voice is to make sure that you're registered to vote. So for those of you that are here on the ground in Greece, please make sure you go to Vote From Abroad and get yourselves registered to vote, because these midterms are very, very important. We want to continue to make sure the world is going in a good direction for everyone and not in a backwards direction. And one of the beautiful things that happens in having such a positive feel coming out of the US is that experiences are much better for Americans who travel because they're welcomed a lot easier when we are a good player on the world stage, when we're careful players. And I have to say that although we've had some very tense moments over this past year or so of Biden's presidency, I think it's probably a much safer place than it might have been with someone else. So please make sure you get registered to vote. Stephen, we can point you in the right direction for vote from abroad if you need to make sure that you're registered as well, since you'll be here in Greece through the midterms. And anybody else, please do reach out to us. We're always happy to take your questions and walk you through the websites and get you registered to vote so that you can be active US citizens, even if you're not within US borders. Again, Stephen, thank you for sharing your great experiences about Greece and becoming our next major Philhellene.
Thank you so much, Stacey.
Okay.